and good afternoon. It's wonderful to be here. And let me begin by thanking and congratulating Deepanwitha for creating an institution that truly has become a role model, not just in India, but across a number of geographies that aspirants are today looking at emulating. She has set very high standards and really, created something that has no equivalent today. A milestone is a moment where we look back, as well as it's an opportunity to look in the front. So this reminds me of SEBI's statutory warning that Deepanwitha's previous performance is no indication of future performance. Please read all offer documents before investing. After celebrating the tremendous achievements of the years gone by, it's now time to chart the course for the future. IKP is unique in that respect that it does not exist for itself alone, like any other entity, but really IKP's success is measured by the numerous stakeholders it touches and impacts. Its success, therefore, can really be measured, and some of the data Deepanwitha did put up. So in Indian lexicon, as luck would have it, and I don't know whether it's by design or default, that we have the same word both for yesterday and tomorrow, which is kal. So after having a kal that's gone by, let's look at the kal that is ahead of us. And when we look at the kal that's ahead of us, I couldn't have thought of a better panel to paint a picture what lies ahead of us. And as I've told Dr. Balaram, he's our opening batsman for the session today. And we are really going to leverage, because they see far ahead than what we can envision. And so on basis of what they see, we look at what course IKP has to chart in the future ahead. So then may I please invite Dr. Balaram to paint us a picture of what he sees ahead. And you can either, sit and talk or come up to the podium, whatever suits you better.
The last thing you should do is to ask a professor what's going to happen in the next 25 years or what should happen in the next 25 years. They're the wrong person to have on the panel, because I've been an academic. I have very little experience in sort of envisioning the future. And I must say that when I saw the video which Deepanwitha projected, that it was heartwarming to see many of the people there. Dr. Ashok Ganguly was truly a visionary. He thought far ahead of his time. I have interacted with him, and each time he was several steps ahead of everyone else. Dr. Mashelkar, of course, was also a person who always had very high aspirations for the country. And at the time that he began to lead CSIR, we were transitioning into the new period which followed Manmohan Singh's famous budget of 1991. And that took a few years to take effect, but that was the time when India really began to change. And I must say, by that time, I was already well advanced into middle age. There's a great advantage in having someone like me come up and say what should happen in the next 25 years, because even if I give you the wrong advice, I won't be around to see the results. And this is why you should always take visions with a certain pinch of salt. Visions are visions. And I think you know best the way forward for IKP. Here I must tell you how short memories are. I knew that IKP was started with the initiative of the ICICI. And at that time, ICICI, I don't think was a bank. I'm not sure. I don't think it was a bank then. And it was the Industrial Credit and Investment Corporation of India. I knew that name. I've forgotten. So when you invited me to this, I always wondered what the I was. And I thought maybe it's India or maybe it's international. It's one of these, which is usually what the acronym use. And I realized after coming here that it was ICICI. And that was, in fact, I think, a step far ahead of its time, because this was done 25 plus years ago, when one would not have thought what would be the requirements for incubating and fostering an economy which was going to be based upon startups in a new area, which was just emerging then of biotechnology. The Department of Biotechnology set up by the Government of India was only a few years old at that time and was still largely engaged in the task of building capacity in the universities and in the institutions. We've come a long way since then, and I was briefed this afternoon by Shivram, who said what was the IKP thinking about. It was really thinking about how to do everything that they've done so well for the last 25 years, how to do it an order of magnitude better. I could see from Dr. Mashelkar's projections, he had, of course, a startup. He said that you must go from from idea to IPO. And that is a very good slogan. And the IPO, of course, must be a very large IPO. So your valuations must be very high. But there's one thing which I have learned over the last few years in retirement. And in retirement, what happens is you're old enough so that nobody feels uncomfortable in coming to you to pour out their woes and occasionally seek advice. And it turns out that I have interacted with a number of people who run or start startups and who struggle along for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and so on. And I think their problems were really, again, articulated very well in that video by Kiran Majumdar. Because you ask yourself this question, when the new liberalized economy began and India began to transform, the information technology sector boomed. The biotechnology sector also began to boom, and we had success stories. But today, after a long time, the major biotechnology company, the one large company associated with biotechnology, remains Biocon. It isn't any other company. And you have to ask yourself the question, when are we going to get there? What's the difference between IT and BT? Karnataka has a minister for IT and BT, but I don't think we've really understood the difference between the two. The requirements for the life sciences sector are different. They require, the most important ingredient here is patience. Once you've made your judgment on which industries or which startups you're going to support, you need to stay with them. This is almost like not changing the Indian cricket team too frequently. So if you take someone into the cricket team, you should allow him a few years of failure before you throw him out altogether. This is needed. We should not get people who score 300 runs and then are dropped from the test team afterwards forever. We need to ask the question, how long do we have to wait? Today, the Department of Biotechnology has set certain yardsticks. BIRAC funds startup projects for some time. Very often, the initial funding is 18 months. And 18 months goes by in the blink of an eyelid. And the young people who have just come out with an idea from universities and institutions don't have enough time to get where BIRAC wants them to be. Most committees are very unrealistic, and most committees are composed of academicians like me. And they are unrealistic in assessing startups. The result of this is that many startups flounder even before they're given a chance to flourish. And that's where I think places like IKP are going to play a key role in really incubating them. Incubating means much more than simply providing facilities for them to work. It also means hand-holding them and also taking them through their difficult period. Financial difficulties are the most common. Technical difficulties are the next. In both of these, I think the knowledge parks need to really come in, really as collaborators of the startups which they are incubating. But I think it would be very important, and I think Kiran said this very well, that you do need a capital fund. You need a fund which is in fact managed by the knowledge park itself. And however it does it should be the business of the knowledge park. But there must be investments which come into the knowledge park and not investments which go directly into the startup. Each startup has difficulty in dealing with venture capital, has difficulty in identifying them for long-term support. And today, the way the Indian economy is, the kinds of numbers that we are talking about as investments in the capital market, they're huge. And I think a little bit of that must be invested in the vision for the next 25 years in different sectors of the economy. And I think the biotechnology and life sciences sector may be one of the most important ones. And I think maybe private entities, together with government, must work to create this kind of capital fund and manage it in such a way that the scientific realities of taking a startup idea to a successful stage. I'd like to see the stage where a startup, once the idea looks good and everybody signs off on it, is now supported at least for a period of 5 years, not for a period of 18 months as the first BIRAC grant does. And the amounts of money that one must invest are significantly more than what is available today. And I think you must think about this in the future. And I guess it is also important to have a combination of people who have practical experience along with a few woolly-headed academics in advising on which kind of projects might be fruitful in the future. We need to encourage the only resource that we have, and that is the younger generation of scientists who are coming out with an entrepreneurial bent of mind. I hope your vision will include some of the thoughts that I've expressed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deepanwitha, for calling me for this session. I'm very, very honored to be part of this session, and we have two, three things, very, few words to add. I'm not someone who's, had a long stint of association with IKP, so my words are, in a sense, an outsider's, words around the understanding of how IKP has, functioned over the years and how it should function later. And the first thing and most important thing, I belong to the institution which I think created this. And, when I look back and, the several, as being part of that, ICICI for a very long time, mostly in business, when I look back, I find, something very, very similar to what IKP has done, to what ICICI, the mother thing has done. They've operated at two levels. They have, ICICI always had some very, very visionary leaders who look far ahead, while the rest of the soldiers like us kept on working on their, their vision. But some of the very important financial institutions got created, because of their vision. But also, as we move forward, institutions like this, they were part of ICICI. The mother gave birth to the child, but various reasons, I think the child, had a life of its own, but it went out of ICICI, and just created a life precisely because of one simple thing, which is, I think a very important decision, which is how leaders select people to run institutions. That's extremely important, and that's something I learned, that you need to, when you found something, when you try to create something, it's also the people who stay on for a long time, who bring that vision into practice. Let's put it that way. But having said that, I just wanted to, I'm not digressing, I just wanted to say, what's the kind of vision I have for IKP? I'm not sure, because of the simple reason that in the long run we are all dead. But that's not the reason. But this is one institution which is proved, and ICICI being the other one, and various other similar institutes which have lived on and which have kind of moved on to create a name for itself and a purpose for itself, which will remain for a long, long time. The only way I look at it is very the way it's morphing. And when I looked at what it was doing earlier versus what it's it is now trying to do, I see one simple difference. And the difference is something which I understood while I looked at the social sector, the need for various people to come together and do social impact work, and see how this entire body of work comes together. I understood one thing, that there are huge challenges in everything we do, and it requires a whole multitude of people to address those challenges, ecosystem challenges, capacity challenges. Capacity, slowly, I think we've discovered capacity, challenges in simple areas like, getting oxygen during the pandemic. That's slowly getting addressed in various ways, various kind of capacity challenges. But the bigger one, and which is where IKP has, I think, started contributing and has started doing extremely well, is about the ecosystem challenge. How do you create ecosystems which are addressing some of those challenges? And it's here I would like to talk about two things. In terms of, to do that, it requires this platform has been unique, and as I studied this platform, it's a function of the platform itself and the leaders who have left it, including the board members who've kind of given them the vision, the ones who we saw on the video, and including the person who's not there. He was recently there. I had the privilege of understanding his vision of IKP, which is Mr. Vagul. But having understood that, one of the key things when he created this institution, he really looked at far ahead, and now I see the value of his vision. I checked with his vision just a few months before his death, and his vision was, what he thought about it at that point in time when he went to the politicians to get this particular physical place in place, putting the right leaders in place, having the governance structures in place, is that he realized that this could be a place where it could be a petri dish where a lot of experiments will take place. And, and something, as they say, life would get created in that petri dish. And that was what IKP was when he created that. Now, as we go ahead, we have, finding the more important thing as it's morphing, and it's my plea to IKP and all the people out here, that the idea is not about only startups. Startups can only exist, they exist in the real world. So, and they exist in the real world with real life challenges and real life market forces and real life, let's say, geopolitical as well as political issues, social issues, and so many other issues. Then what do you need to bring together? You also need to bring together the other part, the parts who are once startups, the policymakers, the government, and various other bodies together to be able to make this ecosystem play. And here, I just wanted to, for us, for one, I think IKP, has shown a vision that slowly gets people out of this whole, intellectual property thing. I think we need to have more ecosystem property, focus on ecosystem property. And ecosystem property, like, supply chain needs to have ecosystem, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. There are lots of ecosystems. They all need to be connected. And that's what IKP is, gloriously well set, to play, do that role as we go forward. Because there are lots of work in the ecosystem, both on capacity and various other things which we need to do. And I strongly believe that what IKP, the glue which puts it all together is science and technology. And that's what IKP brings so uniquely, of course, through a leader like her, when she actually makes that happen. My first interaction with her last year was on a day when she just back from Zurich, of all places, if I'm not mistaken, where she was, participating in a conference on bioterrorism. From bioterrorism to issues around, plant genomics to various other, One Health, trying to, push for One Health, looking at various other, lot of initiatives around healthcare. And a lot of the startups which have, kind of flourished or are part of that whole ecosystem are examples of that vision coming true. But in all of this, one important thing which is coming together, why IKP is important is to have a neutral place. A place where there is a dialogue which is continuous, a science-based dialogue, a technology-based dialogue, where individual motives do not come to the forefront. And finally, at the other end of the thing, it is outcome-based. Coming out of the whole corporate need to scale, and the visionaries, they did mention scale, access to capital markets, and various other things that need to scale. Be very, very definitive, be very, very outcome-oriented in what we do. So in all these complex challenges which we need to move forward on, I think being outcome-oriented, getting the right set of people together, and making that big push is very, very important. But as I talked about the last 25 years, but one clear thing, to do all of that requires people who are determined, and people who, there's this word called influence, or inception, where they plant ideas, then they influence people to really adopt such ecosystem plays, work with each other, collaborate heavily, and then make things happen in the front. I wish IKP very, very well in the next 25 years, and hopefully India's journey, and as people said somewhere here, that there is a need to globalize all of it, not only will it be part of India's journey, but also India will show the way in the way we start working with other ecosystems similar to this across the world. And we've shown that moment. We've shown it is possible to be inclusive. We have possible to to bring lots of. If we just work on these kind of platforms, UPI movement of India is awaited in these kind of areas. Thank you very much for calling me, and I'm very, very honored to be wishing you all well. Thank you.
First of all, I have been honored to receive this Shapers recognition. Thank you, Deepanwitha, for doing this honor to me, and thank you all the IKP family for recognizing me. But I feel is that amongst all the Shapers, they are veterans, and they are amazing people. And to find my name against one of those in that eminent list, I am really honored. But the true credit for building IKP is actually of Deepanwitha. She is the glue, she is that binding force who has held us all together. It is not easy to bring all these people together, and a clap won't just do. In case you wish, you can even get up and give her a standing ovation. In front of a professor of the stature of Professor Balaram, I can't be talking theory, so I have few stories to share, which is basically related with all these shapers which are part of the IKP ecosystem. Let me give you some story about the Hyderabad ecosystem itself. Today, India is known as the vaccine capital of the world, but there is a story behind it. Story which started long back. It was Mr. Varaprasad Reddy, Shanta Biotech, which came to technology development board for seeking some funding support for Shanta Biotech. We used to give concessional debt, angel investment, VC funding were not part of the system at that point of time. So when he approached us, Dr. Mashelkar was on the board of TDB, so was Dr. Kalam, and our secretary, Professor Ramamurthy. They were all part of that board. The case was put up to the board, and with a recommendation from the secretariat that the debt equity ratio is not in line with the norms of TDB. Dr. Mashelkar got up. He said, well, this board is a technology development board. We are not a typical funding organization. I would request the board, give me 2 weeks of time. I'll get this examined and I'll come back and report to the board. If we are not supporting this organization, I am resigning from the board, because if we cannot support organizations of this nature, there is no point in having this board at all. That was the comment which he made. We also funded Bharat Biotech, and also the Serum Institute of India at that point of time. This was for hepatitis B, which we had. Now, just for the sake of startups, I must tell you that the vaccination for hepatitis B was available at the price of 1,800 rupees per single dose. And you required 4 annual vaccines to get yourself completely vaccinated. I remember my children were in school. The school required that all 4 of you in the family, me, my wife, my daughter and son, all get vaccinated. I went for the first dose, but found it pinch on the pocket. Never went back for the second, third and the fourth dose. The technology was available only with SmithKline. Beecham was the company who had the technology, and they were providing that technology. It is CCMB, your own institute here, along with Bharat Biotech, the Shanta Biotech, they developed the technology in the lab. The price came down to 50 rupees per single dose. Shanta Biotech and the other Indian companies out of business. These people, Dr. Mashelkar, Dr. Ramamurthy, and Dr. Kalam, they even pleaded to the government to stop the import of this vaccine. Of course, the government didn't act at that point of time. So these are stories which can continue, but the lesson is that you have to have compassion for the startups as an ecosystem builder. Why India became the vaccine capital of the world is because these people had a belief in these vaccine companies. This is as far as the ecosystem is concerned. Now I'll tell you a brief story of the startups, because we are working for startups, and that for them, the story is again of a Hyderabad-based entrepreneur. The story is of one Mr. Subramani. Subramani is a very interesting story. He was a biotechnologist, but was studying for his MBA at ISB Hyderabad. Subramani developed artificial flowers made out of paper, which looked like, smelt like, and even felt like real flowers. When you touch that petal, it gives you that wet, cold feeling which you get from a real flower. The fragrance would last for about 3 years because he was using a nanotech-based fragrance. And appearance was all like natural flowers. We were running a competition in association with Intel, and there was a global competition which was being held in Silicon Valley. So he was the India winner, and he was nominated for participation in Silicon Valley. When he landed at San Francisco airport, he was carrying these flowers in his hand because he couldn't have packed those flowers. When he was passing through the customs and the quarantine section, suddenly the customs officer, he shouts, "Hey young man, where are you going? Come here." So he immediately took out his passport, his visa, the invitation letter. The custom officer and the quarantine people, they said, no, we are not asking for all that. Why are you carrying these natural flowers inside US? Don't you know you cannot carry any natural flower, any agriculture produce or animal produce inside US? So I said, no, these are artificial flowers. They said, come on man, they are looking like real flowers, feeling like real flowers, smelling like real flowers. So he kept arguing for half an hour, the argument continued. Ultimately, the botanist was called, did the dissection and gave a certificate that these are artificial flowers. Then everybody was very happy, custom officers, the quarantine authorities, in that front of that band, US Customs, everybody posed for a photograph. He was let go. The story is a little long, bear with me. Am I okay with time? All right, I'll try and cut it short. In the evening, he went to the florist to pick up some similar looking flowers so that he could confuse the jury the next day. He took a little more time. The florist got a little irritated. He said, come on man, you want one flower, pick it up and leave. He said, no, this is an artificial flower and I want a similar looking flower. The florist was experienced enough. He turned it around and said, the next question the florist asked, so how many of these are you carrying? He said, about 15, 20. I want 10,000 of these flowers. Tell me the price. He said, $10 a piece. I am giving you a check of $100,000 and the order is here. Send these flowers back to me. Ship these flowers to me once you reach India. Subramani had a complete presentation of 50 slides for the contest the next day. Subramani presented just 5 slides the other day. The next day in the competition, he presented just 5 slides. The first slide was that certificate from the botanist that these are artificial flowers. The second one was that photograph with the customs and the quarantine authorities. The third one was the order of 10,000 flowers which he had received. The fourth one was that copy of that check which he had received of $10,000. Fifth one was a thank you slide. What do you think would have been the result of this? He won the first prize and there were investors which were lined up right there. Subramani is no longer in this business of flowers because of some reasons, but he is in the enzymes business. His company was acquired by Laurus Labs. I don't know the exact value, but it was in several hundred crores of rupees which he was acquired at. So, what did Subramani plan this? I think not. Change of presentation at the last moment is what you take things as they come. And I think that's what is the best thing to do. We have now the expertise and experience of dealing with early stage. We need to set up those funds which we have already done, very, very early stage to, as Dr. Mashelkar said, growth stage funding, but with a human touch, with a compassion. Now, these are very opposite end things. The funding actually demands brutal assessment, whereas the startups demand some compassion. So this is a contradictory statement, but somewhere we'll have to strike the balance. We have used these 25 years very well. Now it is our responsibility to build the ecosystem not only of the country, but across the globe. So can we build capacity of the incubators, of the similar mechanisms, the research parks across the world, across first India and then the world? We were earlier recipients of global knowledge. Can we now share our knowledge with the world, the experience and expertise which we have? The other day, there is a Abu Dhabi Innovation Center. There is some name for that. And one of the persons from Lockheed Martin, Dr. Ray Johnson, who was the vice president of Lockheed Martin, is now based there. They have a US center there. They have 150 early stage investors sitting in one room there in Abu Dhabi. Can we create that kind of an ecosystem here in India? See, visioning is an exercise which you are dreaming with eyes open. So I'm trying to do that. The last suggestion which I have is, don't follow any expert advice, and especially like expert advice like mine. And thank you once more for inviting me. Thank you for all your patience, and you have been a wonderful audience. Thank you.
I'm just throwing open one question, and feel free to take up and throw light on the various dimensions. So we are really talking about the next 25 years, and we are a platform organization. with very diverse and many stakeholders. Each of them have their own success metrics. So as a platform organization, how do we think of our metrics when we say in 25 years hence if we want to say we have been successful, and how do we think about scale? Very broad questions. Any of you can respond in any order.
I'll take a shot at it.
Please do.
Again, when you talk of markers and milestones, I automatically react because, without all of that, nothing gets accomplished. And, I think that's how businesses react. Businesses always react to, markers, some clear outcomes which needed to come. We all know that the business of business is to take risk. Correct. The business of business is to take risk. And so while risk is not a thing, but, the whole idea is whether it's a startup taking risk, whether it's, the other parts of the ecosystem which also reacts to that, we need to have, one is, two clear markers. One is access to funding capital, which is very, very important. The other one is access to markets. Getting people to access markets. And that's where corporates come in, businesses come in, government comes in. You have to give access to markets. And, it's very difficult. What's the point of having startups if you don't have access to markets? Funding will come if it's for the right reason, there's right governance, money will flow. But, access to markets is one thing. And how you develop, how we need to basically, envision that, clear markets, in terms of, so this is what we want to develop in terms of markets or ecosystems. You can, play with the markets could be more economic oriented. Ecosystems is much more wholesome, where economics is also the underlying reason why things happen. But also, very, very clear outcomes which needs to be defined. And we need to get into just understanding as it goes. There's nothing which we can do. What I love about IKP is that every year it kept on looking at it, understanding what it is and started evolving. But it's very important to put these access to market markers in place, because that's something which requires, strong, discussions around what do we mean these goalposts need to be achieved. For example, somebody talked about, kind of a surgical intervention which allows brain surgery to happen thing. But adoption is a big issue. Now that's what I meant by, then you need to have adoption very clearly, demarcated. One of the, and I just love this thing, it's how India's become polio free, where there's a will, all of the, all of the ecosystem has come together. Now, is there lack of money for polio? I don't think lack of money for polio is not an issue. How the ecosystem came in, put those markers in place and say we need to be polio-free by this much. Same with cataract, same with something else. Or various other educational, stuff, around healthcare, around education to start with, and various agriculture and various livelihood initiatives. And then we go on, looking at those markers, and they're all very much there. Biodiversity could be another marker. And we just, I can keep going on and on. But it's important too, put those markers in place in access to markets. Sure. Otherwise, it doesn't define. It's just about how do I access capital versus what do I need to get done in totality. And all kinds of diverse players coming together to achieve that.
To stay informed about the startup ecosystem, subscribe to My Startup TV.